I help teams transform and refine their processes to achieve desired outcomes. I built my first tech company at 16 and then went on to build and sell and transform many, many, many more. Today you heard David Anderson talk about barn raisings and them being an indicator of a healthy community, and that reminded me about my experience 26 years ago when I was the curriculum developer and workshop leader and train leader for the Getty in their Web 1.0 Information Institute web raisings. We conducted 2 web raisings that helped artists and community arts organizations create web presences, and that initiative was successful with over 70 organizations participating and more than 50 websites being created over 4 days. What I learned there was that the processes, structures, and tools created to help people achieve big goals can be reused and adapted to achieve scale, if you start with that in mind, not if you don't. So all items marked in this deck will have an asterisk, and I will provide a QR code at the end, and that will help you get access to any of this. I truly believe in open source, so everything I'm saying here, please reuse it, and I've provided code base, all kinds of things to help you. So a little bit about the org that I run. Hack4Lay is a nonprofit, and all the examples I'm going to use today come from that nonprofit. And we're working on building amazing tools with government and nonprofits. For example, we have a project with the Los Angeles Department of Transportation that is estimated to be worth about $1 million in services. That's UX, design, PM, software developers, over the 3 years that we've been working on it. And we did it all with part-time volunteers, like 6 hours a week per volunteer, because we're a 100% volunteer organization. We're not a school, we don't hire people, we don't charge volunteers to participate, and we don't even make them apply. Anybody who walks in the door can work on it. So that makes some kind of special constraints, right? It means that we have to have systems that are so resilient that anybody can use them and be successful, even people who really just took a class or a boot camp and have no idea what they're doing. So Hack4Lay had been around for a few years when I joined at the end of 2018, and we had a great relationship with our parent organization, Code for America, whose mission is to help bring government services to people using human-centered design. We also had a decent pipeline of new volunteers who are interested and some cool branding. So as you can see from my 2019 assessment, we did not measure up in pretty much every other area. Those were our assets, and that was it. In viable projects, 3 out of our 10 projects were viable. The rest of them, not so much. Reputation, city flat out told me, one of the leaders from the city flat out told me, we can't trust you guys, you're just a bunch of volunteers, and who knows if you'll even be around. Diversity was lower than the tech industry average, which is really saying a lot. And we had like 1 PhD, and everybody else had just like arrived yesterday. And then we had 2 locations, and we eventually grew to 3, but we were limited really by the geographical distance that we could reach through our locations. And then DevOps and technical support structures, people were hosting things on their own Heroku accounts or Amazon that they were paying for, and passwords were on spreadsheets. I mean, it was just a mess. None of it was scalable. And everybody who was serious about working on a project, especially back-end developers, would ask us about this and then not take us seriously and leave because we didn't have processes in place. And then in terms of onboarding and other places where we should have had replicable processes, it was all improvised, which was really kind of cool and agilely, we're just learning from it every time, but then you couldn't pass it off to another person. They would just start doing it a totally different way. So it led to people having different expectations in the organization. And then our delivery framework was all siloed projects. Every project was a silo. Somebody would come in with an idea, I want to work on this, and they would essentially use the organization to recruit for volunteers, but they didn't use any, they didn't use any of the same plans or anything like that. Wait, I feel like I skipped a slide. Yes, so how did we meet all these challenges? Well, we had to find out why people were coming, and it turned out to be jobs. And because of that, we set our North Star on workforce development because it addressed the needs of career changers, the newly graduated, the underemployed, people looking for to level up, or people in a workforce gap, like stay-at-home moms. And we didn't have the luxury of hiring qualified people, so we had to figure out how to get them from arrival to qualified. So what needed to change first? Well, there were so many challenges, it was really hard to know where to start. And you just saw that on the last slide, right? How many challenges we have. Should we start with diversity? Should we start with DevOps? Should we start with security? But we decided to start with the fact that there was no delivery framework, right? Because if people couldn't work effectively towards building software, everything that city leader told me about us not being able to trust us, we couldn't necessarily deliver, that would be true. And I didn't believe it had to be true. So did we have no delivery framework? Well, we did actually have a delivery framework because of all of our projects except for one had no delivery plan. They had a work gatekeeper. We had stale issues, minimal transparency, and no visibility. Even no formal framework is still a framework, right? Which you can then unpack. And that was really useful to us. So how did we pick a new delivery framework? Well, we were a part of a network called Code for America, and then that's part of another network called Code for All, which is an international organization. And we decided to go interview them. So I went around talking to those organizations. I met with small groups, large groups, to find out what they were doing that was on their successful projects. And what I found out is they pretty much had the same thing, whether it was Hawaii or Boston or Missoula, Montana, or Open Knowledge Foundation in Brazil. It was still the same. We were still getting the same. We're still getting the same thing, which was no formal framework. Really, just kind of somebody experienced would come in and they'd make a successful project, and if they left and the project wasn't finished, they would have started but not finished. And if they stayed, the project would get finished. So ultimately, we chose to model on one project that we had, which was successful. It was run by Kate Rose from HelloGov, and she used GitHub and the project boards that come with GitHub for her issues. And then we decided to take on a pilot, and that pilot beat expectations by 100%. We estimated the project in a month. It took 2 weeks with people who didn't know what they were doing. So what accounted for that success? Was it just the Kanban project board? No. It was the fact that with the project organized, it allowed the people who were there to start thinking about how to do things, right? It focused their efforts and their work. And it let the leads, of which I was one, focus on workforce development. So how do I teach this person something so they can deliver on this project? And how do I do it fast? So that workforce development focus, on top of the visibility and transparency of the Kanban, led us to having job satisfaction for the teams, and ultimately to people staying on the project, and then meeting our delivery goals. So we were well on our way. So now imagine that you can't use money to motivate your team members. They can leave your project at any time, and you have to meet stakeholder deadlines. That was our reality in 2019. It was also before the pandemic began, before the work from home revolution, before the Great Resignation, and before now the quiet quitting, right? Now that is everybody's reality. Unless you work for one of the FANG 5 or FANG 5 adjacent, nobody can motivate their team members with money. So lessons are more useful than ever. So how do we motivate them? Well, first we have to figure out what's demotivating them. So we found that transparency creates agency and a sense of belonging. So how important to your enterprise is that sense of belonging? Well, according to Harvard Business Review, it leads to a significant increase in job performance, a drop in turnover risk, and a reduction in sick days. Significant. So what are some of the barriers to belonging? Well, the work gatekeeper model. Everyone has somebody like this in your organization. It could be anybody on the team. You may even be a work gatekeeper yourself. I know I'm one of the biggest work gatekeepers in my organization. They're available during working hours to dole out the assignments, but they have their own deliverables and they can cost a lot of money. So you might have environments that sound very collaborative, like stand up and things like that, But if the work gatekeeper leaves, your project is in peril, and that's how you know they're the work gatekeeper. The downside of having that person be the linchpin in the organization is that it reduces the transparency and visibility, and that leads to a whole host of other problems. So according to a recent Pew Research study, workers who quit a job in 2021 cited a variety of reasons, from low pay to not enough flexibility. And all of these can be symptoms of the work gatekeeper. So let's take a look at how each of these can be addressed with Kanban and some other tools. So we proved that with our Kanban method, workers can be less experienced and still deliver to stakeholder expectations. Kanban creates agency with a self-service model, and we reduced teams' working time by reducing switch tasking and limiting work in progress. And we created a defined and objective plan for advancement, and we put that into our work stream. It's literally in the Kanban. And then we built and automated accountability and reporting without having a work gatekeeper model. So now I know exactly who on the team has not reported in on their progress. I don't need a stand-up to tell me that. I don't need a stand-up to find out who's not being effective. And more importantly, it's not me calling them out. It's me supporting them by reminding them what we need and when we need it and how we need it. And you'll see more about that later. So we call our framework Kanban Plus, and it's available 24/7. It has a self-help structure and removing some of that dependence on the gatekeeper. And you probably already have some or all of these structures inside of your organization. In the system we created, it all works together, and it's built and maintained by the entire team. Now, I think that's one of the big differences, but I heard about in the last presentation the idea of having multiple people be the promisers. Right? And that's essentially how our system works, is that everybody puts the effort in together, which creates buy-in and also reduces the dependency on senior people. Right? So it starts with onboarding to the organization and our tools. So Slack, GitHub, Google Drive, calendar invites, and we give them a guide to how to use Kanban within our organization, specifically with examples from our projects, how it works, et cetera. And that's given to them on the very first night that they onboard. We hold onboardings twice a month. And we get sometimes up to 100 people at onboarding. And that's where we tell them what our organization expects and then how to get onto teams. This gets done in about 2 to 3 hours. And during this onboarding, members learn about new roles, open roles that they can take inside our organization on active projects, and they get connected with a community of practice. And so that is all the developers getting together, all the designers getting together, and so on. And that's where they can talk to volunteers in their same discipline who are different parts of the journey that they're also on. So once 2 new team members have chosen their team, their first activity is making their own onboarding issue onto that team. So we get them using GitHub from day one. And this is everybody, designers, researchers, et cetera. Everybody uses GitHub in our organization. And that creates agency immediately. You're literally in charge of making your own task list. And it's already a template, so that's in the appendix. So it's pre-formatted, but you then are following the steps. And it's interactive with your leads. What's in a pre-work template? Well, you join the communication channels, you get more tool invites, you review the to-do column, you confirm you're ready for assignments, reading guidance on how to work on your first assignment, understanding how to get help, all of those kinds of things. As you can see, there's a lot of things in the onboarding issue. And this is really just a summary. The issues are quite large and involved. And it's like a whirlwind. You know, you feel like you might miss something, but this process gives it context. And then you don't have that stressor. So we find that people, before we did the process and to now, it's a significant difference in the amount of drop-off. Like we were losing 75% of our people during the onboarding process because some of them have never worked as developers, right? And you know, so they went to a school that basically told them step by step how to do things, and then they get out into the real world where we're like, set up your development environment. And that's true for designers and researchers too. Anybody who thinks any other role has it easier, it's just as hard for those people too to get up to speed on your tools. Some companies spend 3 to 6 to 9 months onboarding their people. We have to get it done in the very first week. So figuring out how to make it easier was a big part of our process. And this was led by the team members themselves. the volunteers themselves. So as a lead, if you've provided the same information to 2 or more people that you've onboarded, it could be improved through a transparent onboarding process like this. It's faster for everyone, more respectful, and can be conducted with the help of junior team members who will literally help you make these issues. So what's in a pre-work template for software engineers? Everything that everybody else gets, plus an environment set up via contributing file, and a guide to how to be a good team member and how to become a lead, how to read the board, the Kanban board, to take on leadership responsibilities and rise up to leadership. This contributing file has been, over 3 years, has been contributed to by 23 different developers, one problem at a time. If you have a problem and you got a question, we will answer it. You can ask anything that you want to, and we will answer it as long as you're willing to update the documentation. So it reduces the number of questions that nobody would, thinks anybody else would care about, and it reduces the amount of time that we spent documenting things, because it literally puts the burden on the person that is most able to handle it, the junior person. There we go. Anybody can ask a question, and it improves the knowledge base. My favorite example is from the contributing file from a high school student who didn't have 4 gig available on his hard drive to install Git and some other stuff. And he worked with our tech advisors, Dr. Cynthia, who volunteers. She's a programmer, been there for 30 years at Caltech. And they came up with a solution that only required him to use 300 meg. So that opened the door for a whole bunch of volunteers who probably have already left the organization a long time ago because they didn't have the 4 gig and were too embarrassed to say anything about it. So there's all kinds of things that are happening, and if we give people who are experiencing problems agency to not only work with us to solve the problems, not because we're doing them a favor, but because they're making it better for the next person, then we increase that sense of belonging. Okay, David Anderson said yesterday and today, Kanban is a good method to achieve focus in Scrum. And if that is what we're using it for, then the issue is how we limit distractions. So now that everyone is onboarded, let's look at the work. It starts with great issues that have context. On this project example, we have a very complex research program with up to 500 issues possible over the course of the research. Last week, a new researcher joined the team, and in the past, the research lead and the product lead, and maybe even me, would have spent hours providing context and answering questions. And this had been happening quite a lot over the last year as we took in a massive amount of research PhDs as volunteers. But now, because we've created a relational catalog in our wiki, and we've added this context that you see here to her issue, all she needed to do to work on the issue, which was a script for Research Plan 3 on the Mentor Research Roadmap, was to click on that one link. And then that would take her literally to Research Plan 3, which then would have a reference to Mentor Roadmap. So she was able to find everything in one place. So limiting distractions is super key. Everybody's heard about switch tasking. Let's not do that. So this is the way we do it, is we make sure everything is in the issue. When I go to work on something, all I have to do is open my issue, and everything I need is there, even if I'm the one who put it there, which is a lot of what you'll hear from senior people. They'll be like, I know what to do, I don't need to write it down. Yeah, but if you write it all down, if you document it in your own issue, then you don't have to keep a mental to-do list or a mental, a mental storage catalog of where all this stuff is. So now it's time to define done. We found out we got more work completed with smaller issues that had better visibility when not overwhelming junior team members. If every issue is written as, we need to do X for Y reason. And that's our definition of done. There's a lot of other things like requirements and things like that, but if you can read that sentence, oh, and sorry, it's a little small, we need to finish our mission statement for the project so that we can use it in our brand guide websites in one sheet. So when you work on the mission statement, when you think you're finished with it, you're going to ask yourself, Am I satisfied with this? Is this going to work in my brand guide? Oh, okay, maybe not. Maybe I'll go check with another person. That's going to be part of what I'm doing. In addition to my other action items, I'm going to maybe check with somebody who knows a little bit about marketing on my team or something like that. But it gives the agency to the person who's assigned to the issue, understanding if they think it meets the criteria for done. And then once the overview is written, you should be able to easily define the steps involved in working on the issue. And if you can't define them, then maybe your issue is too big. The bigger the issue, the bigger the ambiguity. By making issues smaller, we have defined places to touch base with our team members, right? If I make an issue that is going to take 2 or 3 weeks, then I might not hear from the person for 2 or 3 weeks. So one of the ways that I make sure that all the team members are on task without having to ask them constantly where they are is let's make the issues as small as they can be. They can always pick up more issues, right? But you can't, it's harder to make something smaller later. And this issue could not be any smaller. It has a size point of 1. It also has a note here, release dependency on update TWE brand book. Because when this issue is done, we already know what the next thing is that we're working on. And the person who's working on this may pick that issue up after they release the dependency, but only if it's at the top of the prioritized backlog. Because maybe it's not. Maybe there's something else in the meantime that got moved up to the top of the prioritized backlog. So checks and requirements make sure that you've completed the work. And that's usually used by QA, but we ask our developers and other people to check it themselves before they send it to QA. A good developer doesn't really ever get anything kicked back from QA, and hopefully the issue's been written well enough so that QA doesn't have other requirements that never showed up in the issue. So in this particular one, we need a refactor of an automation, and the check is test it in your local environment and see that it works. And make sure that all the functionalities that existed before are still work. And they would know that because in the resources, there's a link to where you can find all the documentation about this automation, and that includes what the automation should do. So we also need to know what role is responsible for the issue. If the issue is designed to be passed from person to person, from design to development, or design to research, or research to development, then it probably needs to be decomposed into multiple issues. And they can have cascading dependencies, as you just saw in this last issue. And I'm not suggesting a waterfall thing where you make 100 issues that all cascade on top of each other because you've thought of everything. It's more just like, hey, we know we need to do these things, and we'll try to calculate how long it's going to take to deliver this feature. And then we put a dependency label on any issue that is waiting for another issue before it can be worked on. And that keeps us from looking at them, but it also allows the product manager, in our world's product manager, yours it might be product owner, to look at those on the regular and make sure that nothing is getting left behind, that things haven't been cleared that they can release. And I can go through 100 issues with dependencies in 5 minutes and see if anything should have been put back into the prioritized backlog. We can also use the role labels in conjunction with features and size in order to estimate total time to delivery by a particular role for a feature, that kind of thing. All of these labels are interchangeable, and I can create my own metrics anytime I want, and all of the labels are customizable. So some teams have different labels than other ones. Okay, but does your issue pass the new team member test? Can a new person coming onto the team work on it without talking to you, the author, right, or the tech lead? Is it clear to a non-technical audience? This is the hardest for developers. They really, really want to write these issues that are only readable by them. But the risk of that is that QA doesn't do a good job QAing it. Product can't make sure that that's going to actually live up to what they're looking for. So here is the checklist. And we just talked about these things, right? Specific context, clear requirements, definition of done. It has everything that we just talked about. And what we found is that the difference that this makes, having all of this stuff, means you can get a commit done in a week instead of 3 to 6 months. So we also use milestones to prioritize our issues. When you have over 100 issues in the backlog, you need a way to prioritize fast. Milestones give us that clarity. Also, I can do all kinds of cool magic with changing milestones if a organizational representative person comes down and tells us everything is about to change, we can game it out and they can see exactly how that's going to affect the product. So maybe you're saying at this point, I don't know if we can do all this. Like, it seems like a lot of burden on a senior team member to make all these issues, properly label them, create supportive documentation. You know, how can I document it effectively? The code base is always changing. You know, I don't want some static thing that then that's a product in and of itself, keeping that up to date. You know, and that's always the pressure against transformation. But don't give up yet, because we have a solution. And that is, the work gets redistributed. What was a burden on leads becomes a chance to have agency for junior team members and to create buy-in across the team. We have issue-making workshops. We call them issue parties, and they are definitely parties with lots of joking and laughing and a ton of issues getting made. And a new issue approval process that maintains quality. When Hack for Relay first started using the Kanban and the issue model, it was just me and the tech lead writing up all the issues that were needed for our pilot. I mostly wrote them, he mostly talked, and I asked tons and tons of questions like, what do you mean by what you just said? And I wrote a lot of issues, and that's marked by my circle being green. As the project moved out of the pilot stage, it evolved to the leads making their own issues and me just reviewing them for quality and training. And then now, where everyone on the team makes issues, with the leads reviewing their team members' issues for quality, and product manager prioritizing them, and me Kanban coaching, which is a lot easier now that I'm not making all those issues. So now that you've made all those issues, and team members can assign themselves, right? And they can pick the thing that's the highest priority that they're qualified for, because it's got labels on what role and what complexity level. Then the real magic is in the issue updates. And I've heard other people at this conference talk about putting information in the issue. We are really, really serious about it. Because when you do detailed updates, and that includes screenshots, notes, communication with team members, if I email a stakeholder, I grab that email chain and I throw it into my issue, everything goes into the issue. You're organizing all your work in one place, right? Everything you need is in one place. And I'm gonna give you an example that has nothing to do with work. I recently ordered a washer dryer. I've got a Kanban for my managing my house. I put all the details of the order in. Every time I had to call that store because they hadn't delivered it on time, or they delivered half the parts, everything I needed was right there. The order number, the number of the store, the last person I talked to, exactly what was said. Everything was all in one place. It was the fastest that I've ever dealt with problems like that ever. There was no fiddling for anything. So that means the majority of your time and focus can be spent on making progress, not getting back up to speed where you left off, or worse, carrying around a mental to-do list, which we're all guilty of doing. Oh, I'm going to write this down later, right? But then that keeps you from doing other things. How many times have you gone into the kitchen, looked at the refrigerator and thought, I need this thing? And then when it's time to make the shopping list, you have to kind of try to remember that stuff. And then as soon as you get on the list, then you think of like 5 or 6 other things. But if you never make the list, you don't think of those 5 or 6 other things. So it's actually hurting your ability to deliver. So how do we encourage this practice? Because easier said than done, right? We train team members during that initial onboarding issues. There's all kinds of details in the onboarding issue, and that's part of it. Like, hey, after you self-assign the first issue, tell us what your availability to work on it and when you think you'll be done based on everything that you've just read in the issue. And then when you have been working on it, after a while, give us an update, and this is exactly how you do it. And then when they don't do it, because sometimes they don't do it, we send them an automated reminder telling them exactly what we need. And I don't know if you can read that, but basically it just says, hey, tell us the progress, blockers, availability, ETA, pictures, whatever you've got. And if you need help, here's how to get it. Because by this time, they've forgotten all of that. They're just so frustrated that they can't get the thing done that they wanted to get done for whatever reason. Either they're having trouble technically, or they got busy with their life and they don't know how to fit it together. This is like a blameless problem, but blameless situation. If they say, I'm not available this week to work on it because something came up in my personal life, not a problem. It helps the lead decide whether do they keep them on that issue, is it mission critical, or if it's not mission critical. And just spoiler alert, for new people on the project, we put them on non-mission critical stuff. They'll go on tech debt or accessibility. That's where all our good first and good second issues. As soon as you start getting up to small, medium, large, you're in the delivery pipeline for that's timed. But this helps us understand at that point how serious people are, but more importantly, it helps them understand how much time they really have. Because a lot of people come to our organization thinking that they have 6 hours a week to volunteer, but I don't think anybody's actually done a spreadsheet on where the time actually goes, because most people do not have that kind of free time. And the other thing about this was we have this 2-week inactive label, and that's how I find those issues that nobody has commented on. And then that's a chance to reach out to them on Slack or make sure they're coming to meetings, etc. Again, all this automation is in the appendix. Teams find it tempting to add several people to an issue, especially research. This is their favorite thing to do, is to assign the entire team to research. So I have no idea who's working on anything. It interferes with effective issue updates and documentation, and it's usually assigned the issue should be broken down into multiple issues. We have a new structure that we just started about 3 months ago, and it's been working really magically, and now everybody's on a separate issue, and productivity has tripled from our research teams. One person to an issue. Okay, sometimes people need time off, and that happens in your organization and mine, right? Sometimes it's expected, sometimes it's unexpected time off. So how does the Kanban help with that? How can it make working in your organization more pleasurable and more forgiving and more empathetic? Well, have a process for time off. What is somebody supposed to do with their issue? For one, if they've been doing their issue updates, it's no big deal to take time off, because literally anybody else could pick up the issue, because everything that they've done to date is in there. It might even include a commit of their code, right? And then maybe it goes back into the prioritized backlog, or maybe it's not mission critical. You can wait on them, and then they can keep it for the week they think they're going to be gone. We generally have people return things to the prioritized backlog because we don't like people to camp on things. And sometimes there's some pushback on that, but for the most part, everybody appreciates that they don't have to, just because they said they thought they would be off for a week, if they can't come back for 2, it's okay. We've already factored it in. At the end of them working on the issue, and actually along the way, but less along the way and more at the end, we want them to update the wiki and or our knowledge base. Some projects have knowledge bases, some just have a straight wiki. Again, the person working on the issue should do it. So if at the beginning of the issue they went and connected, like that researcher did, with all of that research data about the program that's in the wiki, then when she finishes her work, she's going to put a link to this new script that she's created onto that page for Research Plan 3. So the next person working on the next phase of that research plan, which might be administering the script, can find it easily. She doesn't have to go and search through her issues to find it or talk to her. It's already there. And this reduces future stress debt of like, oh yeah, I really got to get that cleaned up, increases knowledge transfer, and for development, it helps us update documentation about the code base, which is incredibly hard to keep up to date. So we think of our organization as a never-ending relay race. We don't have sprints. We are 12 months out of the year. And people are coming and going at all kinds of times. We have zero control over that, just new people all the time, new people and people leaving. And we want them to leave because they're leaving because they got jobs, or a promotion, or they had a baby, or any of the number of reasons why people leave. So we needed something that would help us with that never-ending relay race. And I chose GitHub mostly because Kate was already using it and it was free. There's no per-user model, so it worked for us. Developers were also already comfortable with GitHub, and all the other practice areas, research, design, product, they benefit from learning how to work with developers, because developers are still owning the conversation about where the budget goes, right? Developers are still the hardest people to get on your team, effective developers. So by basically bringing everybody to where they work, the developers are under less stress than they were before, and all of the people in our universe who are looking to level up, make sure their skills are cutting edge, are getting to work with developers, and in many teams they've never worked with developers. Some of them already come from enterprise, and they're like, yeah, I never get to talk to the developers. They maybe ask me a question occasionally, but this puts them all in the same place. We're all using the same Kanban board. We can see each other's work, and we have all team meetings where people discuss blockers and cross-ask departments other questions. And then we talk about the features to come and what will be involved and have feasibility conversations. And then developers, work in Miro and Figma, where the designers are. And then GitHub's platform is extremely customizable. All the labels that you've seen are ones that we've made. In the past, we were doing t-shirt sizes on some of our projects. Now we're building an open source tool to calculate number of points per any label that you use. So if you want to know how many points are on the board for research, how many points are on the board for research and the homepage redesign, how many points are on the board for homepage redesign and good first issue, you could sort by all of that stuff. And we can do that because the tool doesn't do much, it does everything, right? It's very developer-friendly tool, and it turns out we're an organization of developers, and so building stuff for ourselves is fairly easy for us. But it also, for us, is really kind of the expression of the Agile principle, people over process, right? It's people making the process do what we needed to do in order to support us, which I like to rephrase as people being supported by process. And then finally, every other tool that we tried had too large an investment time to learn. Although I hear Kanban Eyes is really, really easy to learn. I'm looking forward to checking it out, even though we can't afford it. But we were leaning into short-time contributors, so I needed something that would work for people immediately, right? And that's, oh, wait, no, my laptop. Nathan, I didn't advance the slides fast enough and the laptop went to sleep. We're close to the end. Now he's going to type my very long password in. I wish I knew what was on the next slide.
While you're waiting,
yes.
I think the department answered this better. There's an NGO licensing for Kanban that's very, very cheap. So.
Oh, nice. Cheap and free, not the same thing, but nice. I did mention we're a 100% volunteer organization, right? I did say that? Even I don't draw a paycheck.
Do you use GitHub Actions?
Yes, that 2-week inactive label is a GitHub action. Here's what it does. It checks to see if they have done an update since the last time that they did an update. What's the length of time? And then if it's X number of days, it sends them that message and it puts the 2 weeks inactive label. And then when they do an update, it takes the 2-week inactive label away if it's still there, and it adds an updated label so that the manager can take a look at it. Yeah, and we use those across. We have so many GitHub actions. We use them on pull requests to remind people what needs to go into your pull request. We take the labels from our issues and we throw them onto the pull request so that you can see how those are. Do you need me to come over there?
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry. Yes, they are. All right. Okay. So, ability to reduce noise. The number one problem that we had with having everybody on one board is the leads are like, we need a board over here for designers because all of that stuff, we don't want to see it, we don't want to pay attention to it. But in order for us to make that magic work with the ability to gain insights and really own it as product managers, right, and product owners, is that I need everything on one board. But that's what filters are for. And so you can see here I've got this giant board, and all I did was filter by a milestone, and it took it down to that. And that's just 3 of the columns. I mean, that board is huge. So we use filters, and we have that ability to reduce noise through that. By having all the team members on one board, we're able to do handoffs. This is a big, big deal for us. So it used to be that when design would get done with something, they would bring it to product. And that worked great until we had 2 design leads, 2 research leads, 10 research members, 8 designers, 25 developers, all on the same product with 1 PM. It just was not working, and we needed a way to move things faster. So we created these labels, because like I said, you can create any labels you want. Ready for milestone, ready for research lead, ready for design lead, ready for dev lead. Anybody on the dev team can make an issue. It goes into the new issue approval column with a label ready for dev lead, and then the lead developer looks at only those issues. So like I said, they're not making issues anymore. They're only looking at issues for issue quality from their team members, or making really complicated issues. Really sometimes very, 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 very complicated issues, or laying out something. And the same thing happens with design leads. So as the team members, if let's say I have a researcher who's finished with something and she gets sign off on it about what our next actions are, that's going to go get a ready for dev lead label on her closed issue, and then go back into the new issue approval column. And then the design lead is going to see that and say, okay, design team, we need to make some issues. Let's go look at all the people who've done handoffs for us, and let's have an issue making party. There's a lot of them, or there's a few of them, she's going to assign them out. So these handoff labels allow the handoff to happen without a gatekeeper. Instead, the handoff is just happening between departments. So you can combine any milestone labels, and this is that kind of thing, like ready for milestone and front end. So ready for milestone would be the one that the product manager looks at, because the product manager in our world has to do the prioritization. And then time sensitive helps elevate things, but you can search by any number of combinations based on what you're trying to do. And like I said, we have developed a tool that allows me to see the points with any of these searches. And then anytime we want insights into where a given feature is, how close it is to delivery, potential log jams, it's all right there. So we start with the default columns so that's issues and labels. So now Kanban columns. We start with the typical ones to do, doing, and done. We add in some additional columns, which are the new issue approval column and a QA column. And that's where we facilitate that handoff on accepted issues to the next applicable area responsible. And then finally, when the cycle is complete, the new issue's been made, then it can go to done. And then some of our extra columns are for developers. So after code has been submitted in a PR, we have all the developers participate in reviews based on their skill level that they have attained. So if a new developer has finished their good first issue, good second issue, and they're on a small issue, they can review any good first issue, good second issues. So senior leads are not reviewing every issue that comes down the pike, because we're pushing in, on one of our projects, like 20 PRs a day, right? And that's all the senior lead was doing. But now they don't have to, because everybody just one level up reviews it. And then after they're done, it goes for kind of a final sign-off by the merge team. And then, the senior leads review large size issues, because those are the other senior people. So once a PR has 2 reviews, sent to the merge team and then the senior. And then there's so much more I could talk about with the workflow. And like I said, there's GitHub actions for that. But we've essentially taken the same values that we have for the rest of our project in issues, and we put them into this process too. So obviously I could talk about that for another hour, but I won't. So how do we do? Amazing, actually. Viable projects, we have 20 plus active projects that not even all are on our website. We've got a full pipeline. I think I've got like 40 different projects now that want us to get started with, which we don't even have the people to handle, or we don't have the management. We haven't figured out how to scale that. We haven't figured out how to scale me yet. And then we have a reputation now for organizational stability. We have relationships with 5 different city departments: Los Angeles Department of Transportation, Los Angeles Department of City Planning, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, which runs the largest neighborhood council system in the world, 99 neighborhood councils, each with 40,000 people, representing 4.1 million people, and the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office and Los Angeles City Attorney. And diversity, we went from, well, you remember I told you that that was lower than the tech industry average. We went from 11% of our product managers were people of color to 72%. Now, what did Kanban have to do with it? Well, Kanban gave us that ability to create predictable outcomes. So it allowed us to lower the bar to entry. We no longer need to gatekeep at the front door to make sure the people we get are perfect, because the system helps everybody contribute. So by lowering that gate at the door and not having an application process and letting people join projects as soon as they have enough issues for people to actually work on, we significantly increased our diversity without ever talking about diversity. We have, now 56% of our project leads are identify as female and 3% non-binary. We have PhDs in every practice area. So we didn't just get a bunch of new people. We also got a lot of people who have serious academic backgrounds. Thank you. And now we're fully remote. We have contributors from 6 of 7 continents and over 1,000 Zoom meetings annually. And we have paid enterprise tools where we need them, like AWS, and free where we don't. And our onboarding processes are research structured and measured. And the delivery framework is our Kanban Plus, and it's on every active project. Did you say 5 minutes? Was that? 5 minutes. Oh, holy moly. Well, I better leave time for questions. So I will say lots of lessons from the journey. I'm going to skip through this slide. And there's the appendix. Questions? Thank you all so much.
Let me get the mic if you have questions.
Craig.
Hello. Do you use GitHub, what are they called? Projects, I think, which is a feature that allows you to include issues from more than one repo in a single workflow.
Yeah, GitHub has just made a major change to the way they do project boards. It used to be repository based, and now it is going to be at the org level. It's not an and thing. It's a complete transformation. They're forcing it on us. I'm not happy about it, but we'll adapt. So we do that on. We have communities of practice, and so each of the communities of practice is writing guides, and so all of those guides are on a guide tracker. I just am not really happy with the interface right now because GitHub is having a challenge with their part of the organization that makes their menus. And so if you're in the middle of your repo and then you click on the project board, it takes you out of your repo immediately, and then you can't get back to your code or your issues or your wiki. So we haven't figured out how we're going to solve all that. Other question?
Any other questions? This call? Thank you.
Okay, thank you all so much. It's nice talking to you.